Hello and welcome, I'm Zombie Kitty and welcome to a different type of video. A while back I put a Twitter poll up asking whether people wanted a book review type video on a couple of the Five Nights at Freddy's books. Most people said that yes, they wanted to see it. So here's the first video. I hope you guys enjoyed this and please let me know what you do think. As to determine whether to keep continuing doing these videos in the future. I can talk, I promise. So first up, this is the first volume in the Five Nights at Freddy's short stories called Fazbear Frights. So this is called Into the Pit. This is a collection of 3 short stories. I think at the time of recording there's 7 volumes and each volume has 3 stories in them. So this first one was written by Scott Coffin, who's the original creator of FNaF, and Ellie Cooper. I'm just going to kind of go through each of the 3 stories and say my thoughts on them. I do firstly want to say about the actual cover. So firstly, the actual feel of the book is really nice. It's a really smooth material. The actual titles sort of pop out, which is quite nice. And then you've got the back with the blurb, and then at the bottom you've got the other books that are available. I really hope this camera focuses today. So overall, the actual front cover and the actual feel of the book is really, really nice. I think the front cover is actually my favourite out of the 2 volumes that I own. I've mentioned I think it was when I did the reaction to Fetch, I mentioned that I was currently reading that story, which is in the 2nd volume. I have actually finished that story now. It was fine. I liked the concept more than the actual story itself, which will definitely come up later in this video. I'm not gonna lie. So I'm just gonna say my overall thoughts at the moment on the actual book in terms of its writing and everything. I think overall the book is actually really well written. It is a teen/young adult book, so it's not as complexly written as adult books. Is that even a word? As other adult books or more mature books, but it does still work with the story. So I thought it was well written, actually easy to understand. I think if I was to compare it to any other books, I think it would be Goosebumps. The overall tone of each story was very much like Goosebumps, and even the way it was written felt very much like Goosebumps, which is the horror series by R.L. Stine. And I see that as a compliment. Like, I grew up with the Goosebumps books throughout secondary school, and I really, really like the books. So to be reminded of that in this was really, really cool. The other thing I need to mention as well is that the books don't follow the game lore. It's the same with the actual novels, so the Silver Eyes Twisted Ones, and I think the 3rd one is called Fourth Closet. They don't follow the game lore. So actually, if you're not a fan of the games but you still kind of want to get involved in the Freddy Fazbear universe, then this is, these are actually a good start to a good thing to start with. Saying that though, obviously they do have their references to the games. It being set in the Freddy Fazbear universe is going to. So in one of the stories, the main character has a Freddy Fazbear plushie. Obviously the restaurant is mentioned in every story, which if you're not going to mention the restaurant or the animatronics, then what's the point? And there's just another few sort of small things in there that are referenced, which I'll get into. So, let's start with the first story. So the first story is called Into the Pit. This story revolves around a boy called Oswald, who lives in a town that used to be quite thriving and quite packed, but because the main mill closed down, it's turned into a bit of a dead town. Everyone moved away because everyone lost their jobs, and it's become pretty much dead. And every summer he spends at the library and at his local pizza place, and he wants the summer to be a bit different this year. One day when he's at the pizza place, he decides that, you know what, he's just going to mess around. And before his dad comes to pick him up, he decides to hide in the ball pit that's in the corner of the main room. When he gets up, he discovers that there's kids there all crowded round. There's 3 animatronic animals on stage singing and dancing, and there's arcade games and there's different types of games, and he's really confused by this. And he talks to 2 boys and finds out that when he goes into the ball pit and comes out again, he can travel to 1985. Before his local pizza place was, I think it's called Jeff's Pizza, and it was originally a Freddy Fazbear restaurant. He decides that he wanted a different summer. Here's his different summer. So every now and again, every time he goes to the local pizza place, he'll go into the ball pit, come out again, and meet up with his new time-travel-y friends. He at some point does ask his dad about what happened to the restaurant, and this is the interesting part. His dad is hesitant to answer any questions, and it even says at one point that his dad was happy to see him go out of the car to the library, as if he didn't want to answer any of his questions. So obviously something happened at the restaurant. He goes back there again, and throughout this time he is seen standing in the corner someone in a yellow bunny costume, and no one else seems to notice this person or creature apart from Oswald. But he feels he shouldn't mention it because he's convinced that other people can't see it. So the next time that he goes into the ball pit, he comes up and there's somebody screaming and crying, parents running out with their kids, and the bunny creature is still standing in the corner. He beckons Oswald to follow him to a private room in the back of the restaurant, and sitting in this party room, there's tables and there's party hats, there's decorations, and sitting at the back table are 5 kids, their faces frightened, dead as the night. Oswald obviously freaks out, screams and runs, jumps back into the ball pit, comes back out at his modern day, and so does the creature. So the creature, just as his dad is about to grab Oswald, the creature grabs the dad, pulls him into the ball pit, and Oswald, terrified, is frozen as the rabbit jumps out of the ball pit, grabs Oswald, and drives him back home. Oswald is really confused because no one else can see that it's a bunny creature. Everyone else can see it as Oswald's dad. And the day continues on as normal. Oswald is confused as to why people are referring to this bunny creature as his dad when it obviously isn't. And the bunny creature has not said a word this entire time. Oswald gets into bed that night. The bunny creature goes up into the parents' room, and then Oswald escapes the house and flees back to the restaurant, where he goes back into the ball pit and finds his dad at the bottom of the ball pit. He pulls him out, and then that's when the bunny creature finds them both. He starts to go towards Oswald and the dad and gets caught by a net that's on the ceiling. They then tangle the bunny up more and he hangs, and they flee the restaurant. All the while, the owner of this pizza place has not noticed that anything has happened. No one has heard anything. This entire time, the bunny has not uttered a word the entire time either. The story ends with them leaving the restaurant. So, let's go through my thoughts on this. I think this one was the most interesting in terms of concept, but it did kind of fall flat towards the end. I like the idea that in the restaurant there's a time-travelling ball pit. I think that's really, really interesting, and the fact that you can put time travel into this in an odd way makes sense. It kind of fits in with the whole obscure horror. Like, if you're going to go supernatural with this franchise anyway, you can have room for time travel as well, and I quite liked that. I thought that was an interesting concept to have. I think where it fell flat for me was when the rabbit creature pretends to be his dad, and everyone else can see it as his dad. That whole section near the end kind of fell a bit flat for me. The story pacing slows down a lot. And you don't really get any answers, which I think on one hand is good because it leaves room for theorising, but I think on the other hand, if it's for a younger audience, I think some people are going to want answers, which you're not going to get. My theory on it was that the people who could see the rabbit as the rabbit creature were the people who knew about either the restaurant or knew about the ball pit. So Oswald knew about the restaurant because he went into the ball pit and came out in 1985. The dad knew about the restaurant because he lived in that town when the mill was still open and the restaurant was still open. So they both could see the rabbit as the rabbit, but everyone else couldn't. I think it mentions in the story as well that Jeff, who takes over from Freddy Fazbear's restaurant, he had moved into that town after that restaurant had closed down, so he didn't know what the previous restaurant even looked like. I think that's my theory on it, and I think that's why only 2 people could see the rabbit as the rabbit. The other thing that won't get answered is whether the rabbit was someone in a costume or whether it was actually an animatronic or supernatural creature. Those won't get answered, and I think that's probably what is going to frustrate people the most. I personally thought that was interesting, but I would have liked a little bit of I would have liked more hints as to what was going on, especially because it didn't talk. I thought that was really interesting and really made it mysterious. But I think I wouldn't have liked answers, but I would have liked just a little bit more of a hint as to what that was. And this is kind of what I was referring to when I said it does have references to the Fazbear universe, in terms of not just characters, but also in terms of ideas. So, I mean, look at him. He looks like Spring Bonnie. And the idea that the rabbit killed 5 kids, is that ringing any bells for anyone from the earlier games? So it does have the similar ideas in here, but it's not straight up telling you that yes, this is from the same restaurant. And I like the idea actually that there are different restaurants within that franchise, because we've always been told that Freddy Fazbear was a franchise. It never really felt like that until now. Not until these stories came out. It never really felt like it. It always felt like everything was happening at the same restaurant. But this definitely brings into question, okay, there were different restaurants and lots of different things, bad things happened, so they all had to shut down. That makes more sense. My other theory as well is that the Spring Bonnie, I am just going to call him Spring Bonnie now, Spring Bonnie was pretending to be Oswald's dad because he knew that Oswald had time travelled and knew that this creature had killed the kids. So he didn't want to be outed 30 years later. So to make sure that Oswald didn't spill the beans, he stayed with him. So that's my other kind of theory. Whether they're correct or not, I don't know. And again, we're not going to get answers. So let's move on to the second story, which is To Be Beautiful. This one revolves around a girl called Sarah, who she's obsessed with her appearance. She's obsessed with her looks. She's not very happy with what she looks like. She'd like a better nose, she'd like a flatter stomach, she'd like better thighs, and so on and so forth. And one day, from walking home from school, she passes the old scrapyard and finds an animatronic in the scrapyard. And the description is that, again paraphrasing, but she had bright red lips, pale skin, and 2 bright red ponytails, as well as two red circles on her cheeks. Does this remind you of anyone? She sees this animatronic and thinks, oh my gosh, she's beautiful. I have to bring her back home, I'll clean her up, and she can be displayed in my room as a model of absolute beauty. So she brings her home, cleans this animatronic up, and notices there's an on-off switch. So she switches the animatronic on, and at first nothing happens. And then after a while, the animatronic comes to life. And the animatronic tells her that her name is Eleanor, and that she can make her wishes come true, since Sarah made her wish come true by rescuing her. And Sarah says, I want to be beautiful. And Eleanor says, I can do that. I can make all your wishes come true. And the next day, after Sarah comes home from school, Eleanor says that she has been able to figure out how to fulfill her wish. She has made her a silver heart pendant necklace, which she tells Sarah to wear and to never ever take off. Don't ever take this off, whatever you do. And Sarah says, okay, I understand. Eleanor then says that in order for me to carry out your wish, it has to be step by step. I can't do this all at once. It has to be step by step, and you have to be asleep. So when Sarah goes to sleep that night, Eleanor sings her a little song, and then when Sarah wakes up, she finds that her arms are slender and they're really thin, and she doesn't have any of her skin from any spots or acne on her arms. They're all perfect. So she goes to Eleanor and goes, thank you, thank you so much, gives her a hug and goes off to school. And this is repeated throughout the night, so each night she will go to sleep, Eleanor will sing her little song, tell her never ever to take the necklace off, it cannot be removed. And I think Sarah gets to the point where she gets a little fed up with how much Eleanor is telling her this, and every time that Sarah wakes up, part of her body has changed. So first it's her arms, then it's her legs, then she finds that her torso has changed. She's also noticing that she's getting noticed by people. So whereas before she wasn't noticed by anyone, no one really cared. Her crush Mason was rude to her after she accidentally bashed into him. But now, because she looks different and in her eyes looks more beautiful, people are noticing her. People are starting to notice, they're starting to turn their heads. She's getting accepted by the popular girls. She's thinking, this is great. Even though her best friend Abby is the complete opposite. She's a very geeky girl who doesn't care about her looks. She more cares about, obviously, friendship and having her best friend with her. And she's noticed that Sarah has changed. The last part of her wish when she gets home from school that night is, I want to change all of this, like my whole face. And then Eleanor goes, okay, are you sure about this? Because that is a really big part of my, of what I can do. That's a very major change, and I can't guarantee that you'll like it when you wake up. And Sarah goes, no, whatever, if everything else you've done for me is perfect. It's fantastic, I trust you with this. She goes to sleep that night, wakes up, and her face has completely changed. She is beautiful, Her lips are more plumper, her cheeks are thinner, her neck is thinner, and she looks beautiful. So again she goes, thank you, thank you, thank you, and she hugs Eleanor, and she starts to notice that Eleanor, she's getting a bit scared around her. She goes to take her for a hug, and Eleanor hugs her back, and the hug is described as cold and metallic that sends a shiver down her spine, but she can't think why. So again she goes to school that day, and the popular girls invite her out to the mall, where the girls end up buying loads of expensive makeup, which she can't do because she comes from a very middle class / poor background, so she can't afford any of the highly expensive makeup that the girls buy. And they also take the mick out of one of the retail workers as well, which Sarah isn't really comfortable with, and she's like, I'm not really sure about that. And even when she goes to school the next day, the girls take the mick out of her friend Abby, and even Sarah goes, well, hang on, that's one of my friends, I've known her since kindergarten. And the girls kind of go, like they're not really accepting her anymore, they're not sure about her. And just as Sarah goes to put her food tray away at the cafeteria, she slips and falls. The popular girls don't do anything, they just laugh at her, while Abby goes to her side. The laughing then turns to screaming, and Sarah at the same time starts to feel not quite right, and it's described that as she falls she can hear clanking, and then she turns her head and realises the necklace is on the floor next to her. It's been removed as she fell, and her arms have started to appear metallic as the effects of the necklace wear off. So Abby manages to get her up, quickly gives her the necklace, and Sarah runs home, knowing that Eleanor will help her. She has to help her. She fulfilled the wish, right? She gets home, and by this point she is mostly metal. She goes to the garage after not being able to find Eleanor in the house, and discovers that there's a whole load of bin bags filled with something, and there's blood on the floor that's covering the bin bags. She opens up one of the bin bags and finds a whole load of body parts. Her body parts. Eleanor has been chopping up her body parts and replacing her with metallic parts. Eleanor then finds her in the garage, now with the same type of necklace around her neck, and Sarah goes, you have to help me, you have to help me. And Linda goes, I did help you. I told you not to take the necklace off. And you fulfilled my wish. You saved me, you helped fulfill my wish. She presses a button on the necklace, and suddenly Eleanor is now transformed into the old Sarah. And it's at this point that Sarah realises that actually she was beautiful. She looked amazing. Eleanor then puts on Sarah's old clothes and skips out of the garage, while Sarah starts to stiffen as she turns into a whole load of scrap metal. So this is the story where I definitely started thinking this is very Goosebumps, because a lot of Goosebumps stories had either unhappy endings or like plot twist endings, and this definitely felt the same. It was definitely in a very similar tone, and that's where I started thinking, this definitely feels very Goosebumps. So if you're a fan of Goosebumps books, I would recommend this. This story is actually my favourite one, not only in terms of the plot but also in terms of the writing and its tone. Like I said, it reminded me a lot of Goosebumps, and I think also the moral of this story as well is that, appreciate and learn to love yourself. Like, it wasn't until at the end where she saw what she originally looked like that she thought, oh, I am beautiful. Like, why was I fussing so much about my appearance? It was also the fact that Sarah gained new friends and also gained a boyfriend with Mason, her crush, not through her looks but through her confidence. Because she had new appearances that she was comfortable with, she became more open and more confident with talking to people. It says at the beginning of the story that she's quite shy because she doesn't really feel happy with what she looks like. So I think it's an interesting one as well. It's basically saying learn to love yourself, and then from that you can gain confidence. Like, learn to love yourself but learn to be more confident around people. I probably butchered that kind of lesson, but I think it's an interesting story, and it is probably my favourite one. I do also want to say that there is more to these stories than what I'm saying. I'm just telling you the basic like story, especially with To Be Beautiful. There's definitely more to it that the story goes into that I have left out deliberately. So the last one is called Count the Ways. This one is interesting because it's constructed differently. So this one is going back and forth between the past and the present. Past as in a few days beforehand or a few weeks beforehand, and then crossing back to the present of what's going on. So this one revolves around a girl called Millie. Millie comes from a family whose parents are constantly trying to think of get-rich schemes. So they are currently living in Saudi Arabia, and they gave Millie an option to either move in with them or move in with her grandpa and stay in that area. She chose to live with her grandpa. She's a stereotypical like emo goth girl, so she fantasizes about death. She listens to like heavy metal. She wears all black and wears black makeup. So very sort of stereotypical idea or ideology of a goth girl. And she isn't really very happy with anything. It's near Christmas and she doesn't see the point in Christmas. She's like, I don't see the point in celebrating something joyful when it just means you're getting closer to the inevitable end. Her grandpa constantly gets a bit fed up with it and tries to cheer her up. Doesn't really work. And she ends up meeting someone called Dylan, who is very similar to her. He's a new kid in school and is a goth person like her. And she starts getting a bit happier from the friendship that they bond. Until she sees him at the Christmas market and he's holding hand with one of the popular blonde girls who she despises. And she originally had the wrong idea of, she thought they were dating when that wasn't the case at all. So that's one side of it. The present side is that her grandpa has a garage which he uses to repair things, and she decides that on Christmas Day she wants to escape the family, so she's going to hide in the garage. In there she finds a white and pink bear animatronic with a missing hand, and decides, okay, I'm going to hide in its stomach until it's time that the family leave. She opens the door and finds that it's pretty much empty of wires and circuit boards. There's actually room enough in there for her to crawl into and to crouch in. So she hides in there, shuts the door to the stomach, and then a few minutes later realises she can't open it. And that's when the voice appears, because this animatronic is still alive. And the present section is literally the animatronic deciding how to kill her. And he says, I've heard all the time that you fantasize about death and you want it so much, and I want to kill you because I'm bored. I've been here for ages and I'm terribly bored, but if I kill you, then it will cure my boredom. You'll die, which is what you've always wanted, what you always fantasize about. It's a match made in heaven. And that's when she realised that actually she fantasises about it but doesn't actually want it in reality. The story ends with it going back to the grandpa's house, and the family are now wondering, where's Millie gone? She ran off in a sulk because she didn't want to be around family. She's been gone for a couple of hours. Where's she gone? And it ends there. I'm not going to say anything else because the present timeline does end in a particular way that I won't spoil. But that is the basic plot of Count the Ways. While the construction of it was interesting and different from the other two stories, I think this was the weaker one. It was a nice idea, but it actually made the pacing really all over the place. Because the two timelines weren't very equally written out, if that makes sense. So it's like after a while you forget what the present timeline was. Aside from the VR game, we've never really seen the inside of an animatronic. They've always kept the idea of, the animatronics will stuff the people inside their stomachs, but we've never actually seen that. So I liked this story in terms of that. I thought that was really cool, because it gives us a perspective that we'd never seen before. I think Millie was a fine character, but she was kind of annoying after a while. But I think for a plot this sort of basic, it didn't really need too much character development. I mean, let's be honest, the animatronic was Fundo and Freddy, which the grandpa wanted to fix up and didn't realise was still alive. I think there's a lesson in this one as well. I think overall the lesson would be careful what you wish for. As the story goes on, Millie does realise that she was only fantasising about it and didn't actually want death. She didn't want it to be a reality. She was just fantasising about it and like making stuff up in her head, but realised she didn't actually want it. So I think the overall lesson here is be careful what you wish for, because it might come true. There is an epilogue. I have a problem with the epilogue straight away, in that the way that it's printed is not printed very well. So a lot of it I couldn't actually read, which was a shame. But it does concern a guy called Detective Larson, who is basically, he's not overlooking a particular case, but someone else's. And then the sheriff comes in and shows him photos of a case, which is Sarah's case. And he basically says, we found who did that to Sarah. And you're not going to believe where it came from. So I think what happened was Sarah's parents went to the garage, found the bags with the body parts, found the scrap metal pieces, reported it to the police. And then they found sightings of the animatronic. I think as well, something I thought to mention with that story, with the second story surrounding Sarah and Eleanor, is that in the book The Twisted Ones, which is the second book in the Five Nights at Freddy's trilogy, there's something called illusion discs. So I think the necklace was an illusion disc. Illusion discs, basically the staff put these discs into the animatronics in their back, and a hologram will basically disguise them as something else. So I think that's what the necklace was. But yeah, I think the epilogue is interesting. It's just a shame that I couldn't read it because it wasn't very well printed. But yeah, I think overall this was a really good book. I think it's really well written. The stories for the most part are interesting, and I think even with Count the Ways, even if I think it's the weaker one, I still thought it was interesting. It still has enough interesting material in there to make it stand out. So like I said, the way it's constructed is different. We get to actually see the inside of the animatronic, because it gives us a different perspective. And even with the other two, like, the writing is still really good, even if the ending of Into the Pit kind of fell a bit flat. I would say if you're a fan of the Goosebumps stories, then I would recommend it. And even if you're not a fan of the FNaF games, but you want to still get involved in the universe, I would really recommend the books. So yeah, but I hope you guys enjoyed that. It went on a lot longer than I expected it to, but yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Let me know what you did think, because that would depend on whether I do other book videos in the future. If you have any video recommendations for me or game recommendations for me, please let me know via Twitter. The Twitch and Twitter will be down below in the description. But thank you all for watching, and I will see you all soon. Bye!